The ballroom was drowning in light. Crystal chandeliers burned overhead, refracting gold across champagne flutes and glossy marble floors. Screens looped the same message again and again. Fisher Dynamics IPO. A new ERA begins. While investors laughed too loudly and executives clinked glasses like they already owned the future. Kayla Simmons stood near the back of the room, fingers curled around a champagne glass she hadn't touched. The bubbles had long gone flat. She hadn't noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the stage, on the man adjusting his cufflinks under the spotlight like this night belonged to him alone. Gary Fisher smiled the way he always did when cameras were near. Controlled, confident. A smile that had once made Kayla feel safe, like she was standing beside someone unbreakable. Now it felt like she was watching a stranger rehearse a lie. "Mr. Fisher will speak in just a moment," someone whispered behind her. "Can you believe this valuation?" 8 years, another voice murmured. 8 years, and he pulled it off. Kayla's lips pressed together. 8 years. Her phone vibrated in her clutch. A message from an unknown number. "You should be proud of him tonight." She didn't reply. The applause started suddenly, swelling as Gary stepped forward. He raised a hand, laughing modestly, playing the role perfectly. The screens behind him shifted to old photos, early office spaces, whiteboards covered in formulas, blurry shots of late nights and empty coffee cups. Kayla's chest tightened when she saw one image linger a second too long. Gary at 26, sleeves rolled up, hair messier, sitting on the floor of a half-lit apartment with papers everywhere. She was just out of frame. "Thank you," Gary said into the microphone. His voice carried easily, practiced by years of pitching to rooms full of people who didn't believe in him yet. Tonight isn't just about Fisher Dynamics going public. It's about persistence, belief, not giving up when the odds say you should. The room hummed with approval. Kayla felt her pulse in her ears. This was supposed to be their moment. She remembered standing in the kitchen that morning, straightening his tie while he checked his phone, distracted. Remembered kissing his cheek and saying, "We did it." Remembered how he'd smiled, quick and absent, and said, "I'll see you inside." He hadn't come back for her. Gary continued, "There were times I didn't know if we'd make it. Times when the company was one bad month away from collapse." Kayla's grip tightened on the glass. One bad month. She remembered those months. Remembered the nights she'd slid her credit card across the table and said, "Put it on this." Remembered lying awake calculating rent, utilities, food, and how long she could stretch her savings without telling him. Gary paused, glancing toward the side of the stage. His smile shifted, something warmer, something rehearsed. "There's someone very important I want to introduce tonight." A ripple of curiosity moved through the room. Kayla's stomach dropped. A woman stepped forward from the shadows. Tall, elegant, perfectly dressed in a white gown that caught the light like it had been designed for this exact moment. Her hair fell in soft waves, her posture effortless, her smile already familiar to the cameras. Kayla felt the air leave her lungs. Whispers started instantly. "Is that? No way. I thought they broke up years ago." Gary's hand slid around the woman's waist as if it belonged there, as if it always had. "This," Gary said, his voice warm, proud, "is Lillian Moore." The name hit Kayla like a slap. Lillian, the ex, the woman who had walked away when Gary couldn't afford dinner without checking his bank balance first. "My partner," Gary continued, "and the woman who will be standing beside me as the future lady of this company." The room erupted. Applause, gasps, laughter, congratulations shouted from every direction. Kayla didn't hear most of it. She saw Gary lean down, whisper something in Lillian's ear, saw Lillian laugh softly and rest her hand on his chest, right over his heart, the same place Kayla used to rest her head. Someone behind Kayla chuckled. "Guess loyalty only matters until money shows up." Another voice, sharper. "Poor girl. She actually thought she'd make it." Kayla's face burned. Her ears rang. She didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She stood there while the man she'd built announced to the world that she no longer existed. Gary kissed Lillian's temple. The cameras zoomed in. The screens magnified the moment until it was unavoidable. Kayla finally lowered her glass. Her hand was steady. That surprised her. She turned, slowly, and walked toward the exit. Kayla? She stopped. Gary's voice followed her through the noise, softer now, uncertain. She turned back. For a split second, something flickered across his face. Guilt, panic, calculation. "Can we talk?" he asked, already stepping down from the stage. Lillian's hand tightened on his arm. "Gary," he hesitated, then looked back at Kayla. Just a moment. The crowd parted for him like this was still his world. They stood a few feet apart, surrounded by celebration. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," Gary said quietly. Kayla studied him, his tailored suit, his polished shoes, the confidence he wore like armor. "When was I supposed to find out?" she asked. Gary exhaled. "After tonight. I was going to explain." She laughed once, short and disbelieving. "Explain what?" "That 8 years of my life didn't make the cut." "That's not fair," he snapped, then lowered his voice. "This is business. Appearances matter." "Since when?" Kayla asked. "Since the day she walked back in?" Lillian stepped closer, her smile polite, eyes sharp. "Kayla, right? I've heard so much about you." Kayla looked at her. Really looked. Perfect makeup. Diamond earrings. Calm confidence. "Heard what?" Kayla asked. Lillian tilted her head. "That you were supportive." "Supportive." Kayla nodded slowly. "That's one word for it." Gary rubbed his forehead. "Kayla, please don't do this here." "Do what?" she asked. "Exist." His jaw tightened. "You're making a scene." She glanced around. No one was watching them closely anymore. They were already old news. "No," Kayla said softly. "You did." Lillian squeezed Gary's arm. "The investors are waiting." Gary hesitated again, then looked at Kayla with something like regret. "We'll talk later." She met his eyes. "No, we won't." She turned and walked away before he could respond. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. Kayla breathed it in like she'd been underwater too long. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Gary. "Don't be dramatic. This doesn't have to end badly." She stared at the screen. Then she typed back. "It already has." She slipped the phone into her bag and kept walking, heels clicking against the pavement, each step carrying her farther from the man who had just erased her in public. Behind her, the building glowed with celebration. Inside, Gary Fisher was shaking hands and smiling for cameras, unaware that the foundation beneath his empire had just cracked. And Kayla Simmons, the woman everyone thought would beg or break, was already doing something far more dangerous. She was remembering everything. Kayla didn't sleep that night. She lay on her side in the apartment she had shared with Gary for 6 years, staring at the faint crack in the ceiling above the bed. It had been there since their second year together, right after the landlord refused to fix the leak properly. Gary had promised to handle it once the company stabilized. The company always came first. Her phone buzzed again around 2:13 a.m. "Gary." She let it ring. A minute later, another message came through. "I didn't want to humiliate you. You walked away before we could talk." Kayla closed her eyes. Humiliate, as if humiliation had been an accident. She turned onto her back and let her mind drift backward, pulled by a gravity she couldn't stop. 8 years earlier, Gary Fisher had been sitting across from her at a coffee shop with a chipped mug and a notebook full of impossible ideas. "I'm telling you," he'd said, eyes bright, hands moving as he spoke. "This isn't just another startup. The market's shifting. If I can get in early." "You don't have funding," Kayla had said, not unkindly. "I will. You don't even have a team. I'll build one." She'd smiled then, amused more than convinced. "You don't have money." Gary had leaned forward. "But I have vision." She should have walked away. Instead, she'd said, "Okay, show me the numbers." That was the first night she stayed up past midnight with him, reworking projections and asking questions he hadn't expected. He'd stared at her at one point and laughed. "Where did you learn this?" Kayla had shrugged. "I like understanding how things work." He'd looked at her differently after that. That look turned into reliance faster than either of them admitted. Now, lying alone in the dark, Kayla remembered the first time Gary's company nearly collapsed. He'd come home shaking, dropping his bag by the door and sliding down the wall until he was sitting on the floor. "They pulled out," he'd said. "The angel investor." He pulled out. Kayla had knelt in front of him. "Okay, breathe. What does that mean?" "It means payroll next month." His voice broke. "It means we're done." She hadn't hesitated. She'd opened her laptop, logged into her savings account, and turned the screen toward him. "How much do you need?" Gary had stared at the number. "Kayla, I can't." "You can," she'd said. "You will. Later." Later had stretched into years. She rolled onto her side now, clutching the blanket, anger simmering beneath the exhaustion. Her phone buzzed again. A call this time. She answered without looking. "What?" she said. "Where are you?" Gary asked. "At home." "Good. I'll be there in 10. "No," Kayla said. Silence. "What do you mean, no?" he asked. "I mean don't come," she said calmly. "I'm not in the mood to be managed." He exhaled sharply. "You're being unreasonable." She laughed softly. "You stood on a stage tonight and replaced me in front of hundreds of people. Let's not pretend I'm the one being unreasonable." "This is bigger than us," he said. "It always was," she replied. He lowered his voice. "Lillian brings stability. Her family has influence. Investors like her. And I don't." Kayla asked. "That's not what I said." "But it's what you meant," she said. "You needed me when you were invisible. You need her now that you're visible. That's not fair." "No," Kayla said. "It's accurate." He didn't respond immediately. She could picture him rubbing his jaw, pacing, recalculating. "You don't understand how this world works," Gary said finally. Kayla closed her eyes. "I understand it better than you think." She hung up before he could reply. In the morning, she packed quietly. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, folding clothes, sorting papers, slipping personal items into a single suitcase. She left everything else untouched. The couch she'd paid for, the kitchenware she'd chosen, the framed photo of them at a cheap beach hotel during their first year. She paused at the desk in the corner. Gary's desk. Her desk, really. Stacks of documents lay neatly arranged, investor drafts, early pitch decks, legal correspondence. Her handwriting was everywhere in the margins. She opened a drawer. Inside were folders she hadn't touched in months. She hesitated. Then she took them. At noon, she walked out and didn't look back. Across town, Gary was already unraveling. "What do you mean she's gone?" He snapped into the phone. His assistant sounded nervous. "Her access badge doesn't work. Her email's inactive." "That's impossible," Gary said. "She doesn't have the authority." "She had admin-level clearance," the assistant said carefully. "You approved it." Gary hung up and slammed his phone on the desk. Lillian looked up from the couch in his office. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," he said too quickly. She studied him. "You look rattled." "I'm not." "You're lying," she said lightly. "Is this about Kayla?" He stiffened. "She's being dramatic." Lillian crossed her legs. "Wasn't she involved in the business?" "She helped," Gary said. "Early on." "How early?" Lillian asked. He frowned. "Why does it matter?" "Because investors ask questions," she said. "And if she's upset." "She won't do anything," Gary said sharply. Lillian raised a brow. "You sure?" He didn't answer. Across the city, Kayla sat in a quiet cafe with her laptop open, coffee untouched. Her friend Maya slid into the seat across from her. "Okay," she said, eyes wide. "Start talking." Kayla exhaled slowly. He announced his ex as his future wife at the IPO. Maya's mouth fell open. "He did what?" "In front of everyone." Maya swore. "That man has lost his mind." Kayla stared at the screen. I think he forgot who built the scaffolding under his success. Maya leaned forward. Kayla, how involved were you, really? Kayla's fingers hovered over the keyboard. More than anyone knows, she said. More than he knows? Kayla smiled faintly. Much more. She opened a file and turned the screen toward Maya. Contracts, emails, legal drafts. Maya's eyes widened. Why are these in your name? Kayla took a sip of coffee. Because he trusted me. And because, Maya said slowly, he never read the fine print. Kayla closed the laptop. I never wanted revenge, she said. I wanted partnership. Maya reached across the table. What do you want now? Kayla looked out the window, watching people pass, unaware that a corporate empire was standing on a fragile truth. I want my life back, she said, and I want the truth to stop hiding. That evening, Gary stood alone in his office, staring at the city skyline. His phone buzzed. An email notification from Kayla. Subject line, clarification. His stomach tightened as he opened it. Gary, effective immediately, I am withdrawing from all informal advisory roles. Any further use of my work, documents, or strategies without proper attribution or legal review will require my consent. Regards, Kayla. His phone slipped from his hand. For the first time since the IPO, fear crept in. And somewhere across the city, Kayla Simmons closed her laptop and breathed out, steady and calm, as the first quiet crack widened beneath Gary Fisher's shining empire. The first call came 3 days later. Gary was halfway through a meeting with senior executives when his phone vibrated against the glass table. He ignored it once, then again. On the third vibration, irritation flickered across his face. Give me a second, he said, already standing. He stepped into the hallway and answered. What? Gary, the voice said, calm, professional, dangerous. This is Andrew Collins from Meridian Capital. Gary straightened. Andrew, I wasn't expecting your call.
No, Andrew replied evenly.
You weren't expecting my questions either. Gary's jaw tightened. What questions? Several documents that were referenced in your IPO prospectus, Andrew said. Specifically, the early operational framework and cost optimization strategy. Gary leaned against the wall. What about them? They're not attributed to anyone on your current executive list, Andrew said. And yet they're foundational. We'd like clarification. Gary's pulse ticked faster. Those were internal contributions. By whom? Andrew asked. Gary hesitated half a second too long. Andrew continued, because according to our legal team, those documents are registered under Kayla Simmons. Silence. Gary swallowed. That must be an administrative oversight. Perhaps, Andrew said, but oversights at this level concern investors. We'd like to schedule a call. Gary forced a laugh. Of course. Happy to clarify. After the call ended, Gary stood frozen in the hallway, his reflection staring back at him from the polished glass. He dialed Kayla immediately, straight to voicemail. He texted her. We need to talk. Now. No reply. Inside his office, Lillian was scrolling through her phone. Everything okay? She asked without looking up. Yes, Gary said too quickly. She looked at him then. Really looked. You're pale. It's nothing. Gary, she said lightly. If this is about that woman. Kayla, he snapped. She blinked. Excuse me? Her name is Kayla, he said. And she's not that woman. Lillian studied him for a moment. You're still emotionally attached. He turned away. This isn't about emotions. It's business. She stood, heels clicking softly against the floor. Then why are investors asking about her? His head snapped up. How do you know that? She smiled faintly. Because my father called. Gary's stomach dropped. He asked. Lillian continued. Why Fisher Dynamics has foundational IP registered under someone who isn't on the leadership team. Gary ran a hand through his hair. I can fix this. Lillian crossed her arms. You'd better. That same afternoon, Kayla sat across from a man in a gray suit with sharp eyes and a voice that didn't waste words. Ms. Simmons, he said, sliding a folder across the table. You were very careful. Kayla didn't smile. I had to be. You structured your involvement as informal advisory work, he continued. But you retained ownership of intellectual property. Yes. And you never signed it away.
No.
He nodded slowly. Did Mr. Fisher know this? Kayla looked out the window. He trusted me. The lawyer leaned back. Trust is not a legal strategy. No, Kayla said softly. It's a vulnerability. Later that night, Gary showed up at her door. She opened it but didn't step aside. He looked exhausted. We need to talk. You keep saying that, she replied. But you never listen. He glanced down the hallway, then back at her. Can I come in?
No.
His jaw clenched. Kayla, please. This is getting out of hand. She laughed quietly. Funny. That's exactly how I felt at the IPO. He lowered his voice. You're putting everything at risk. She met his eyes.
No.
I'm removing myself from the lie. You knew what you were doing, he accused. You set this up. Kayla shook her head. I set it up 8 years ago to protect us. You changed the U.S. He stepped closer. What do you want? She didn't answer immediately. What do you want? He repeated. I want acknowledgement, she said. I want the truth told. And I want my work respected. And if I don't? He asked. She smiled faintly. Then investors will keep asking questions. He stared at her. You'd destroy me? She tilted her head. You destroyed us. I'm just stepping out of the wreckage. Behind him, his phone buzzed again. Lillian. He didn't answer. Kayla closed the door gently. Inside, she leaned against it, heart pounding, hands shaking just enough to remind her she was human. Across town, Lillian was losing patience. This is becoming embarrassing, she said to Gary later that night. My family doesn't like uncertainty. I told you I'd handle it. You should have handled it before the IPO, she snapped. Now it looks like you built your empire on someone else's back. That's not fair, isn't it? She asked coolly. Because that's what the narrative is becoming. He stared at her. Are you doubting me? She smiled. I'm protecting myself. The words echoed. Protecting myself. Gary suddenly understood something he hadn't before. Lillian had never loved him when he was nothing, and she wouldn't stand by him if he became nothing again. The next morning, headlines began to shift. Not scandals. Not yet. But questions. Who is Kayla Simmons? Uncredited architect behind Fisher Dynamics? Investors seek clarification on IPO documents. Gary watched the screen in his office, his reflection layered over the words. His phone rang again. Another investor. Another polite request for answers. Another crack widening. Across the city, Kayla sat at her kitchen table. Laptop open, sunlight spilling across the floor. Maya read headlines over her shoulder. They're circling. Kayla nodded. They should. Are you scared? Maya asked. Kayla thought of the nights she'd cried silently so Gary could sleep. Of the way he'd smiled at another woman on a stage built on her work. No, she said.
I'm steady.
Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. This is Lillian Moore. We should talk. Kayla stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she typed back. Sure. She closed the laptop and leaned back, exhaling slowly. The storm was no longer coming. It had arrived. Lillian chose a private lounge overlooking the river, the kind of place where conversations were meant to disappear into leather chairs and low music. Kayla arrived exactly on time. Lillian stood when she saw her, offering a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Kayla, thank you for coming. Kayla took the seat across from her without returning the smile. You said you wanted to talk. Lillian studied her openly. You don't look like a woman trying to destroy a company. I'm not, Kayla replied. I'm a woman correcting a story. Lillian folded her hands. Let's be direct. What do you want? Kayla met her gaze calmly. The truth. Lillian laughed softly. Truth is expensive. So is betrayal, Kayla said. Lillian's expression hardened. Gary built that company. Kayla tilted her head. Gary fronted it. Silence stretched. You're angry, Lillian said. I understand. But emotions don't play well in boardrooms. Kayla leaned forward slightly. You didn't leave Gary because you fell out of love. You left because he was poor. Lillian didn't deny it. I left because I wanted security. And now, Kayla asked, do you want him or the company? Lillian's jaw tightened. I won't be painted as the villain. You already are, Kayla said quietly. You just haven't realized it yet. Lillian stood. This conversation is over. Before you go, Kayla said, rising slowly, understand this. I'm not asking for anything that isn't mine. But if this turns into a power struggle, I will win. Not because I'm ruthless, but because I was there when none of you cared. Lillian stared at her, then turned and walked away without another word. That evening, Gary's world fractured. The board meeting was supposed to be routine. It wasn't. Andrew Collins didn't waste time. We need transparency. Another board member leaned forward, specifically regarding Kayla Simmons. Gary forced a smile. Her role has been exaggerated. Andrew slid a document across the table. Has it? Gary glanced down. His stomach dropped. Operational blueprints, Andrew continued.
Investor frameworks.
Cost reduction models. These aren't marginal contributions. They were collaborative, Gary said tightly. Then why isn't she listed as a co-founder? Someone asked. Gary opened his mouth. No answer came. The room shifted. This IPO rests on credibility, Andrew said. And right now, yours is in question. Gary drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his hands ached. At the apartment, Lillian was waiting. Your board is panicking, she said flatly. I know. My father called again, she continued. He doesn't like instability. Gary turned to her. So what are you saying? She hesitated. Just long enough. I'm saying I need distance, she said. Until this settles. The words landed heavier than any headline. You're leaving? He asked. I'm protecting my future, she replied, grabbing her coat. Gary watched her walk out without looking back. For the first time, the apartment felt as empty as Kayla had once felt standing in a room full of applause. The next morning, the media stopped whispering. They started shouting. Articles dissected timelines. Analysts questioned valuations. Comment sections filled with speculation. And one name kept surfacing. Kayla Simmons. She sat across from a journalist in a quiet studio, hands folded, voice steady. Were you a co-founder? The journalist asked. Kayla chose her words carefully. I was there when it mattered. Why weren't you acknowledged? Kayla met the camera's gaze. You'd have to ask Gary Fisher. Gary watched the interview from his office, face pale. His phone rang. Kayla. He answered immediately. Please, tell me what you want. I already did, she said calmly. The truth. I'll fix it, he said. I'll make a statement. You should, she replied. Can we talk in person? He asked. There was a pause. One last time. They met at the old office, the one with peeling paint and borrowed desks. Gary looked around, guilt pressing in from every corner. I forgot where this started. You didn't forget, Kayla said softly. You outgrew it. I never meant to hurt you. That's what people say when they benefit from the hurt, she replied. He stepped closer. I was scared. So was I, she said. Every day. But I stayed. He swallowed. I chose wrong. Yes, she said simply. Tears filled his eyes. Is there any way back? Kayla shook her head. For us? No. For the truth? Yes. The next day, Gary Fisher stood before cameras again. This time without a smile. I owe the public an apology, he said. And I owe Kayla Simmons acknowledgement. Much of what built Fisher Dynamics came from her work, her strategy, and her belief when no one else had any. The internet exploded. And somewhere quiet, Kayla Simmons closed her laptop, knowing the end was finally in sight. The apology didn't save Gary Fisher. It slowed the bleeding, but it didn't stop it. Within days, Fisher Dynamics stock dipped. Not catastrophically, but enough to make people nervous. Nervous investors asked sharper questions. Analysts rewrote projections. Board members who once praised Gary's vision now spoke in cautious tones. Gary sat alone in his office long after everyone else had left, staring at the city lights. He replayed the past over and over, searching for the exact moment everything went wrong. But the truth was cruelly simple. He had believed Kayla would always be there. Kayla, meanwhile, was learning how silence felt when it wasn't forced on her. She woke up without checking her phone, ate breakfast without rushing, took walks without rehearsing conversations in her head. The absence of chaos felt unfamiliar, like a room she hadn't entered in years. Maya watched her one morning from across the kitchen table. "You're lighter." Kayla smiled faintly. "I think I forgot what that feels like." "Do you miss him?" Maya asked gently. Kayla considered the question carefully. "I miss the version of him who needed me. I don't miss the man who erased me." Gary tried calling again a week later. She didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "I just wanted you to know. I see it now. I see everything you did. I wish I'd said it sooner." She listened once, then deleted it. Across town, Lillian watched the fallout from a distance. Her calls to Gary went unanswered now. When she did manage to reach him, he sounded hollow. "This is temporary," she said during one strained conversation. "Markets recover." "People don't," Gary replied. She fell silent. A week later, her name quietly disappeared from public mentions of Fisher Dynamics. She didn't fight it. There was nothing left to gain. The final board meeting came sooner than Gary expected. Andrew Collins didn't smile as he spoke. "This company needs stability. And right now, you are not it." Gary nodded slowly. He'd known it was coming. "I'll step down," he said. The room exhaled. Kayla learned about it through a news alert while sitting in a park. She read the headline once. Then she put her phone away. There was no triumph. No gloating. Only closure. Later that evening, Gary showed up where she least expected him. At the small bookstore cafe she'd started frequenting. He stood awkwardly near the entrance until she noticed him. She didn't ask why he was there. She already knew. "I'm leaving the company," he said quietly, sitting across from her. "I know." He looked at her hands. Calm. Steady. "You were right about everything." She didn't respond. "I lost Lillian," he continued. "The board. The image. And somehow myself." Kayla finally looked up. "You didn't lose yourself. You traded it." He swallowed. "Is there anything I can do to make this right?" She thought for a moment. Live honestly, without borrowing someone else's spine. Tears welled in his eyes. "You were my backbone." "No," she said gently. "I was my own." They sat in silence. Then he stood. "I hope you're happy," he said. Kayla met his gaze. "I'm becoming." He nodded once and walked away. Months passed. Kayla didn't return to corporate life. She consulted selectively, taught quietly, built something small, sustainable, and hers. One afternoon, she received an email from a young woman. "I read about you. Thank you for telling the truth. It made me leave a situation where I was shrinking." Kayla smiled. That night, she stood on her balcony, city humming below, and felt something settle inside her. Peace. Not because Gary had fallen, but because she had finally stood. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Urban Folks TV channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps bring more powerful stories like this to life, and your voice matters here. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.